Hi everybody, this is Dr. Laundville and welcome to Cell Physiology Lab for 2021. This is the podcast you want to listen to first before you tackle all the other podcasts. So this is just to orient you to the Brightspace page and tell you what you need to do before we start in-person labs. So here's our Brightspace page here, and you're going to start with the introductory podcast, which is this podcast right here that you're watching, and then you're going to also watch 3 other podcasts. I'll show you where those are. You're going to read the lab protocol sheets. I'll show you where those are. And you're going to take quiz 1 and 2. And that's before January 25th, which is the first week of our in-person lab classes. Okay, so let's take a look at the syllabus. Here's our syllabus here for lab in 2021. Here's my details. This is how you can call me. There's my email. I have office hours from 11 to 12 on Monday or Tuesday. If that doesn't work for you, you can make an appointment, but please try to come to those office hours if you can. There's 2 teaching assistants for the class. That's Carrie Burlow, who's my PhD student, and Matt Tarchik is Dr. Rena's PhD student. These guys are both senior PhD students, have taught the lab multiple times, and are very knowledgeable. This is a link to the Teams page. We're going to use Microsoft Teams, more so in lecture than in lab, but if you need to come to office hours, that's the link that you'll use to go to office hours, and those will be in Teams. The way that this is going to work this semester is unlike any other time that this class has been taught. And if you're in this class, you know that it was restricted to graduating seniors who have this lab required for graduation for their majors, and that's biochem majors and biomedical science majors. The reason we did that is because we have very much reduced capacity in terms of bodies that can be allowed in the lab because of the pandemic. So only 8 students in the lab at a time, plus an instructor, and therefore we have to switch things into A and B sections. So for the first 2 weeks of the semester, this week and next week, we are remote for all classes on campus, and that's also true for the last 2 weeks of the semester after spring break. So our in-person time is limited, and because of that limitation and because of the limitation of how many people can fit in the lab at one time, we're changing the structure of this lab and changing how it's going to go. So you have to know what lab section you signed on for. So you signed on for section 11A or 11B, 12A or 12B, 13A or 13B. If you're in the A week, your first in-week lab will be the week of January 25th. If you're in the B week, your first in-week lab will be in the week of February 1st. It's really important that you know what lab section you're in, and if you're in A or B, we're going to check names as they come in because there's only those people are allowed in the lab, and if you happen to show up in the wrong lab, you won't be allowed in. So make sure that you check on your schedule if you're a Monday, a Tuesday, or a Wednesday, and if you're A or you're B. So the way it's going to work is first we'll have all the A sections, section 11, 12, and 13 A week, and then we'll do the same lab the next week for the B sections. And then that's how we'll proceed throughout the semester. So you're going to want to consult this schedule as you go along, okay? That means that the number of labs that we will get to do in person is reduced just because of the situation with the pandemic. And how we're going to approach that is normally what we would do in this class is we start the semester learning some pretty standard molecular techniques, and then while you're learning those techniques, you are writing a proposal to do your own independent project, and then we do that for the last half of the semester. Can't do that this year just because of the restrictions of the pandemic, so instead what we're going to do is we're going to compare two lines of worms, a wild type line and a mutant line, for various variables that we can collect by PCR, qPCR, Western blots, etc. We're going to collect those data as a class throughout the whole semester, and you will be collecting those data. And then at the end of the semester, you're going to write an abstract with those data. At the same time, you're going to write a proposal as to what would you do if you could do anything you wanted in terms of your own independent original C. elegans projects. And I'll go over that a little bit more. So make sure that you pay attention to this schedule and know when you are supposed to come to lab, and don't come to lab when it's not your day, because we're just going to not let you into the lab because of the pandemic. Okay? In terms of how you get your grades, you're going to take quizzes online on Brightspace. I'll show you where to find those. You'll write a lab notebook. There's a rubric. I'll show you where that is. You want to take notes on anything you're not going to remember 5 years from now. You can use any word processor that you want. You're going to hand it in as a PDF file. You're going to take pictures of things that happen in lab and put that into your lab notebook, and then you will have that as a document, and that'll be part of your grade by the end of this semester. Okay? The abstract with all the data that we collect as a lab together. Everybody writes their own abstract, and that'll be worth 50 points at the end of the semester. And then the proposal, you'll start off writing that on your own, and then you'll team up with somebody else in your lab section to continue the various other phases of the proposal. And then the total number of points you can get is 400. You can see that the proposal is half of that. It's going to be the majority of the work that you're going to do in this class. It's a 2-credit lab, more than is expected than your typical 1-credit lab. And there's a significant amount of work that you need to put in outside of in-class time. Okay? The quizzes will be after you do a pre-lab podcast. You're going to take 2 quizzes in these first 2 weeks before your first in-person lab, and that will be based on the material that you are supposed to view and read and understand before you get to lab. So when you get to lab, we aren't actually going to be talking to you much other than getting you oriented as to where things are, but you're expected to know what we're doing when you arrive in lab. And that's what the pre-lab podcasts and the pre-lab protocols and the quizzes will achieve, and that you are ready to go when you come to lab. You're going to maintain a digital lab notebook, as I mentioned before. These are all the things that, again, you should know by the time you leave this lab, and that you won't necessarily remember 5 years from now. So that's everything that you're doing. You can add our protocols to your lab notebook by just inserting those files. That's totally fine. You should have your own notes in there. You should have your own data. Those data may be numbers, they may be pictures, they may be both of those things. And then you should have some conclusions as to this worked, this didn't work, this is how I would do things differently. In the normal course of this course, these protocols would be used in the independent phase of the projects, where If you've already done a protein assay, you go to your notebook and you figure out how to do a protein assay again. The way that's going to work this year is you're only going to get to do it once, but you should be able to pick up from your lab notebook and know how to do this the second time. The techniques that we're using in this lab are very practical and common molecular techniques. Many of the students who graduate from this lab list these techniques on their CV when they're trying to get a job, and that's great. I encourage you to do that, but that means when you are telling somebody, I've done a Western blot before, they will not start with, okay, here's how to do a Western blot, and they say, okay, you've done it before, here's our stuff, go do it. And so you have to have good detailed notes so that you can do that. That's the goal for the notebook. The proposal we'll talk about a lot as we go forward. The first phase of the proposal is coming up with a hypothesis. The hypothesis is on C. elegans. It can be anything you want to do with C. elegans as long as it's practical. In other words, we can afford it and we have the equipment to do it, and that you could get it done in about a 4-week time period. Normally we would actually do this for the winning proposal, but we're not going to do that this year. We're going to use the same sort of parameters to develop these proposals this year. So you want to, from now on, be thinking about possibilities for original questions using C. elegans to address something you're interested in with cell physiology. Then you can start talking to me and the TAs about, could I do this, could I do that, sort of thing. We'll go over more in detail about how to write a good hypothesis. You'll turn that in on the 1st of February. And then after that, I will look at all those hypotheses. I'll select the top half, and the ones that score in the top half, those will be the hypotheses going forward. If you make it into the top half, you'll partner up with somebody else from your lab section who is not in the top half, and then you two together will do all the other parts of the proposal. If you don't make it to the top half, you partner up with somebody who did, and you two together write all the other parts of the proposal. The next part you will do would be an experimental design, how many worms you're going to use, how many plates, what your treatment's going to be, what your method's going to be. I'll give you feedback on that, and then you're going to hand in a complete first draft. It's a 1-page proposal that includes introduction, methods, analysis, conclusions, all in 1 page, with a separate page for references. We'll talk lots more about that. That'll be due right before you go on spring break, and then we will talk about your complete first draft after you get back from spring break, and then you'll write a final draft, and that's due on the right at the end of the semester. These start off with small amount of points. The hypothesis, I think, is worth 15 points. I can't remember exactly. And then they become more and more points as you go on. The first draft is worth 40 points. The final version is worth 100 points. So you can make lots of mistakes without paying big penalties and points as you go on. And then by the time you write your final version, you've gotten lots of feedback from me, and it should be a piece of cake, and you should all get great grades, which is what everybody wants, and what I want is for you to learn a lot in the process. This is a real practical sort of thing to do, and this is something it's likely that if you go on to professional school, you're going to have to do this sort of thing, maybe within a year, and so it's not something you get a ton of practice with as an undergraduate, and I think it's really important. Probably the most valuable thing you'll get out of this class is how to write a proposal. The abstract is using all the data that we collect as a group over the course of the semester, and then you'll write an abstract. We'll talk lots about plagiarism and cheating. Everything that you turn in is going to get turned into turnitin.com to check for plagiarism. If you're found to have plagiarized anything, you're going to lose a minimum of 200 points, which is half of the points that you can earn in this class, and so it's an automatic fail. You can ask anybody. I am very, very serious about this, and I take it very seriously, and we will talk lots more about that. You're taking an online class, or at least a class that has a big online component, and so you need to have basic computer skills. You got to have access to a word processor. You got to be able to convert things to PDF format. You have to be able to put assignments in the Dropbox on Brightspace. You need to be able to take images in some way. If you're having any trouble with that, please let us know sooner rather than later. Okay? You're going to want to check your email every day for possible announcements or schedule changes, especially this semester with the pandemic raging on. Things can change at the last minute. You're going to want to make sure that you know about them as soon as possible. Okay, there's a fast go through the syllabus. Now, let me show you where some of the other things are. So, if you go under course materials and content, you will see all the pre-lab podcasts are here. You're not going to see this one because I'm looking at it here as an instructor. You'll see that when it becomes available. So before the 25th, you're going to view Lab 1, Lab 2, Wormorama, and Lab 2, Harvesting Worms. Quiz 1 is based on Lab 1 pre-lab podcast. So you take Quiz 1 after that, and then after you review all the material for Lab 2, that's when you take Quiz 2. There's also written protocols. You're going to want to look at the Lab 1 protein assay protocol and the Lab Wormorama protocol. And then when you get ready to take those quizzes will be here under assessments, quizzes, and exams. There's quiz 1 and quiz 2. Take those when you are ready. Make sure that you take them before the 25th. Even if your first lab is until February, you want to take those by the 25th. Okay, so if you go back to Brightspace, this class, cell physiology, is laboratory. All sections are in one Brightspace page, and you'll see that, whether or not you're in section 11, 12, or 13, A or B for those. And again, you have 2 weeks to do the preparation for viewing all those podcasts, taking the quizzes, viewing all the stuff on the syllabus and the pre-lab protocols. You want to take those quizzes by the 25th, and then for the A group, I will see you the week of the 25th, and for the B group, I will see you the week of the 1st. Still pay attention to your email. I'll be sending out more information in the next 2 weeks about the hypotheses. I don't want to overwhelm you right now, but make sure you monitor your email for future announcements. So with that, we're going to have a great semester, as good as we can. I know that this pandemic is not a great situation, especially for a lab class, but we're going to do the best we can, and you will learn lots. So look forward to it, and I will see you the week of the 25th or the 1st.